Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air with breaking news. Longtime Donald Trump confidant Roger Stone in a federal court in Florida at this hour, having been arrested this morning in a pre-dawn raid of his Fort Lauderdale home. Stone has been charged with 7 counts of obstruction, making false statements, and witness tampering, centering on his communications with the Trump campaign about WikiLeaks and stolen Democratic emails. Stone, who has been close to Donald Trump for decades, now becomes the latest Trump associate to be indicted in the ongoing investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller. NBC's Kerry Sanders is outside the courthouse in Fort Lauderdale. What's been happening there?
Well, they've just concluded the presentation in front of U.S. Magistrate Lorena Snow, who has decided that Roger Stone will be able to walk out today after he signs over a $250,000 signature bond, which means that in the next couple of hours, we may see him walk right out of the courthouse here and come over here, because he is not shy from cameras, and you can see all the cameras and the microphones that are set up to hear what he has to say about this indictment here. His home was raided this morning shortly before the sun came up. FBI agents with weapons and their vests on served a search warrant, took him into custody, and at this hour, FBI teams, agents are currently at his home, still going through his home, looking for evidence. Lester?
And Kerry, this was not the formal arraignment. This is a very, very early appearance for him.
Exactly. The question here is, okay. What did you say, sir?
45 minutes an hour. Roger.
Okay.
Right there.
Apparently, Roger Stone will be out here within the hour to speak before the cameras. Yes, this was not the formal arraignment. What they're basically trying to determine is that he will indeed not be a flight risk, and the U.S. magistrate here determined that's the case. One of the questions was this timed on a Friday for some reason? But clearly that the magistrate is having him released. There doesn't seem to be any extra motive to make his life maybe miserable over the weekend sitting in a federal detention center.
All right, Kerry Sanders outside the courthouse. Let's go to our justice correspondent. Pete Williams has been following this case quite closely and has the latest from our Washington newsroom. Lay out, if you can, what has happened. What is in that indictment, Pete?
Sure. First of all, just a note about the proceeding. In federal court, this is called the initial appearance. You don't enter a plea. It's basically to advise you of the charges. He'll ultimately have to come back here to Washington, D.C., where the charges were filed. And what the Mueller team says is that he has committed basically 2 categories of crimes: lying to congressional investigators about his efforts to contact WikiLeaks to find out what they may have had in terms of hacked emails from the Democrats and Hillary Clinton's campaigns, prodding them to release more, acting through an intermediary to try to get Julian Assange to tell more about what they had and release more damaging emails to damage the Clinton campaign. The charges also say that he was contacted by some members of the Trump campaign to ask what WikiLeaks had after Stone had bragged that he was in touch with Assange himself. Now, there's no documentation that he ever did that he in fact contacted Assange through intermediaries. And the second thing the special prosecutor says here, the special counsel Robert Mueller, is that he urged another man, a talk show host, to lie to Congress when he was asked about all of this, telling him he should plead the Fifth, invoking the name of a character from the Godfather movie who's called before Congress and falsely claims he didn't know anything, and saying at one point to this intermediary, "If you don't lie to Congress, I'll take your dog." Lester?
And there will be those who already are parsing this indictment. Pete, what does it not say? We know, of course, this investigation has been about this whole issue of collusion. Does it tie him to communications with the Russians?
No, it does not. Here's what it doesn't say. It doesn't say that he was directly in touch with the Russians. It doesn't even say that he was directly in touch with WikiLeaks. But, you know, Roger Stone brought this on himself. He painted the bullseye on his own back, because early on, even before Robert Mueller was appointed, he was bragging that he was in touch with Julian Assange. He later backed off about that, but obviously, if you're going to look at the Russian attempts to meddle in the election, you're going to want to know who was in touch with WikiLeaks, because Mueller has already said that it was the Russians who hacked into the Democrats and Hillary Clinton's computers, and it was the Russians who gave that to WikiLeaks to make it public. So he brought this upon himself, and what Mueller says is when the heat was on him, when investigators began to ask questions, he started lying and encouraging others to do the same.
And there was language in here that suggested and frankly said that a senior Trump campaign official directed some of this communications, find out what they have. Any clues in here that would indicate who that senior official was, and does it rule out the president?
Well, so the answer to the question is no, it doesn't rule anybody out. There are several references in here to senior Trump campaign officials, more than one person. Now we know that toward the end of this whole saga, one of those senior campaign officials, according to a person familiar with the communications, was in fact Steve Bannon. But we don't know specifically who all the people referred to in this indictment as senior campaign officials are. But the picture painted by the indictment, Lester, is that when the Democrats said they'd been hacked by the Russians, and when WikiLeaks began to say, we've got this stuff and we're putting it out, that's when the Trump campaign said to Roger Stone, well, you're the guy who claims to be able to talk to Julian Assange. What else have they got? See what else they have. That's the picture painted by the charges today.
And we're getting a little bit of a color from this initial court appearance by Roger Stone from inside the courtroom. Let me just look at the notes here. Apparently, there's a $250,000 signature bond required here. His hands were shackled in the court. He is going to be released. He'll be restricted to South Florida, Virginia, and D.C. Again, Pete's saying the case will go forward in Washington. He's not allowed to change his address. He'll surrender his passport. Apparently, his passport is expired. He is not able to contact witnesses, sell personal property, agree to drug testing. These are some of the conditions of his release pending this appearance in court today. We want to go to Kristen Welker right now at the White House. Kristen, what reaction have we been hearing from the White House?
Lester, the reaction so far from the White House and from the president has been defiant. We got our first tweet just moments ago. Let me read it to you. The president tweeting, greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. No collusion in all caps. Border coyotes, drug dealers, and human traffickers are treated better. And then he asks this question of this video that was obtained by CNN. Who alerted CNN to be there? CNN was there earlier today when Roger Stone was arrested. So that has been the president's response so far. It's what you would expect. It is something that we have heard from this president time and time again, no collusion, and referring to the Mueller investigation as a witch hunt. Let me read you the more measured statement from his attorney, Jay Sekulow, who wrote, the indictment today does not allege Russian collusion by Roger Stone or anyone else. Rather, the indictment focuses on alleged false statements Mr. Stone made to Congress. Now, in talking to those close to the president's legal team, they stressed that point that Pete was just talking about, the fact that the indictment does not draw a line between Roger Stone and Russia. Now, Sarah Sanders trying to distance the president from all of this, saying earlier today this has nothing to do with the president and certainly nothing to do with the White House. The president, though, raised some eyebrows during the campaign about this very issue, Lester. As you'll recall, he stood at a podium time and time again and said he loved the WikiLeaks releases, and in one instance also called upon Russia to hack into Hillary Clinton's emails. So all of this raising more questions. And of course, nearly a dozen former Trump advisors, Trump campaign officials have either pleaded guilty or been indicted as a part of the Mueller investigation. So this has been a growing crowd over the Trump White House. And all of this comes against the backdrop of the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. I can tell you that White House officials have been huddled in their offices meeting. Now, they usually have meetings throughout the morning, but undoubtedly this has been front and center today. Lester.
All right, Kristen Welker, thanks for that characterization. What's happening there? I want to go to Chuck Todd right now, moderator of Meet the Press. Chuck, as I noted with Pete a moment ago, there's going to be a lot of parsing of this indictment. It appears the White House was caught off guard. I don't think anyone was surprised that Roger Stone was in legal jeopardy, but the timing certainly seemed to be a surprise. What does it all mean?
Well, look, I think that the most important part of this indictment, I know there's a lot of focus on the process side of this indictment, but it is the beginning of Robert Mueller laying out the collusion argument between WikiLeaks and Russia. And in many ways, I have to admit, Lester, I am now rethinking about that surprising Rudy Giuliani statement about 10 days ago when he clarified his denials about collusion, and he said the president didn't collude with anybody, and he told me on Sunday that he couldn't rule out others on the campaign did. Well, lo and behold, that's what this indictment shows, is someone on the campaign certainly was colluding with Roger Stone, who was colluding with WikiLeaks. Now, none of this is able to connect directly to the Russians. As Pete pointed out, Robert Mueller has made it clear that the material, it was Russian intelligence, got it to WikiLeaks. Now he's making it clear Roger Stone was a conduit between WikiLeaks and the Trump campaign. What is not proven is that somehow Trump, Stone, and Russia all knew that all of this was here. But the fact that that part of the case is starting to be laid out by Robert Mueller is significant, and it shows you, I think, where this is headed next. The other thing is, we still have a couple more people that Mueller has never interviewed, that the assumption is they're targets. And that probably the biggest name on that list is Donald Trump Jr.
And that was in regard to the meeting, the infamous Trump Tower meeting.
Correct.
All right, Chuck Tuttle. Let me bring in Chuck Rosenberg right now, former U.S. attorney, NBC News analyst. Chuck, what do you see here? What is should be the level of concern of the White House as this case begins to unfold?
Sarah Sanders' statement aside, they ought to be concerned. She said this is not about the president. His name is throughout this indictment. Now, to Chuck Todd's point, which I think is an important one, there are still pieces that are missing, but we're seeing more and more of the picture filled in. If you remember, Lester, back in July, when the Mueller team indicted the Russian intelligence officials, they left a breadcrumb for us. They told us that U.S. persons were involved. Now we know who some of those U.S. persons were, definitively. And with each indictment, with each additional document dropped into the public domain, it gets closer and closer to senior campaign officials, and perhaps is an important word here, perhaps to the president himself.
What are you going to tell the committee?
Yeah, I'm curious. There has been this expectation that the Mueller team was prepared to issue its report and maybe wrap things up as soon as the next month or so. Does this change that thinking in your view?
Well, in my view, there's really several separate strands. For instance, there's an ongoing investigation, a very important one in the Southern District of New York. Not technically the Mueller investigation, but certainly it had sprung in part from it. As well, the Mueller team could release a report and then release another report. They could release an interim report. They could release a report and continue to investigate perhaps counterintelligence matters. And so whether or not they drop a report soon doesn't suggest to me that this investigation by any means is over. If anything, it seems to be continuing. The president continues to do things that suggest that there would be a good reason to take a deep look at the counterintelligence implications of his conduct. So, Lester, I would say report or no report, it seems to me to be continuing.
Chuck Rosenberg, thank you for your insight there. And again, we are Roger Stone, associate of the president, appearing in court, his initial court appearance after being arrested in a raid in his Florida home today. Let's go to Kerry Sanders right now outside the Fort Lauderdale Federal Courthouse there, who has a little bit more color and to tell us what to expect here. Kerry?
Well, we're waiting for Roger Stone now to exit. Joining us is Karen Duva. She's the NBC producer who made her way into a very tight courtroom to describe a little bit of what took place in there. So, first of all, when you got in, Roger Stone was already there.
He was already seated. It was tough to get in that courtroom. There were a lot more spectators than we expected, the media expected. So we were all like pushing to get in there. Well, we got seated. He was sitting, his hands were shackled. And he was very calm, confident. When he had to stand up to talk to the judge, he told the judge, explained to him what was going to happen. He said that he cannot change his dress. He must surrender his passport, which he said, Your Honor, my passport is expired right now. He cannot sell any personal property. He can continue to see a doctor, has to agree to drug testing and substance abuse testing.
Did they tell him that he was limited of where he could travel?
Yes, his travel is restricted to only the southern region of South Florida from Vero Beach to Key West, the Eastern District of Virginia and D.C. And
what was he wearing as he was in there?
Okay, he was wearing a navy blue a polo type shirt.
The sort of clothes he might have been wearing when he left his house this morning?
Apparently so. He didn't. There was no suit and tie or anything. The court closed.
Okay. Now, right now, that took place in the U.S. Magistrate's courtroom on the second floor. Where do we believe he is right now?
Okay, he's probably upstairs right now, signing the papers that he needs to sign to go on to the next phase, which is pretrial.
Okay. And did he leave the courtroom with the U.S. magistrates, or were you ushered out before he left, and how did he exit?
We all, well, you know, the media, we have to get out here, so we all left, and then he was taken out.
Okay. So thank you very much, Karen. So that's Karen's view from inside the courtroom. We should note, for those who are wondering, there are no cameras in federal court, no cell phones, so it takes a little bit of time for the information to get out here. But we did have a representative come out here who shouted to the crowd out here, specifically to the media, that Roger Stone would be down within 45 minutes to an hour. That's sort of a guesstimate. The process upstairs can be quick, it can be slow, but eventually we're going to hear from Roger Stone today. His attorney has already made a statement earlier today to NBC News saying in part about this indictment, saying that it is ridiculous. I know we're going to hear much more from Roger Stone.
All right, Kerry Sanders. In fact, he has been vocal in the past, so it would not be a surprise if he speaks when he comes outside the courtroom. We are going to go off now. We'll come back on when we see Roger Stone, if he has something to say, and certainly we'll come back on as events warrant in this case. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, Los Angeles. Good day.
I invest in the Facebook, so I'm real thankful that you all are addicted to it.
You have any stock? Are we friends? I'm gonna get you.
I'm in there, but I erase my app.
For me, like I have like I don't know. He only lurks for his wife. Oh, I sent you an invite like forever ago.
Sorry, I don't have the app. How do you accept it?
On Facebook, you don't have the app?
I don't even do that.
Legacy meetings.
It's
You're doing it now.
Are you leaving?
Yes, I hear you. Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna call Michael now.
I like to just have back in the U.S. This guy, your friend's got back in the U.S. Sorry, just odd. The last hour.
We got here like 4:30. 4:30? Check the live feed. All right, well, I'll debrief you later. All right, I'll talk to you later.
Just give you a camera, you go live right from there.
Whatever you want to do, man.
I want you to stream it right up.
Yeah, like Facebook Live. Yeah, I'm good.
Gotcha. Coming?
Millennium, man.
Heads up, Gary.
Are you going to egress? He's going to come down right as you do.
Are you guys getting a heads up from the inside? Are you getting a heads up? You got it.
You could just be trolling. I think trolling. What if it's a troll and he's not coming?
Excuse me?
What if it's a troll and he's not coming?
Can I just get more airtime? Always an upside. Always an upside.
You go on Slack? Just make sure I'm not sitting.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Not really.
Yes, I do, Russell. Level check 1, 2, 3. I hear you. Yes.
No, I'm so old, I'm not leaving my Oh, you know what? I've got lawn chairs in my SUV. I know you've got shorts. Right.
You guys all gonna go back or you?
I imagine them. I'll take a step back.
You're gonna have to take more than a step. How are you?
Do the best I can. We are too. Fuck both. Yep. Okay. There's the artist guy.
Yes, we're expecting him to come out because the representative came out and shouted twice that he would be out in about 45 minutes to an hour. We've probably already passed that period of time, but we're expecting him to be.
Got gray hair and a scarf.
He was in the magistrate's courtroom, which was a pretty small courtroom. NBC News who was in there said it was very crowded. Some members of the public and reporters were even unable to get inside. There was so much interest. When they were finally able to get permission inside, Roger Stone was already in the courtroom before U.S. Magistrate Snow. He was seated at the table, his hands handcuffed. NBC News said he was wearing a blue shirt and appeared like the shirt he wore when the federal agents, the FBI, came to his house this morning and knocked on the door in a pre-dawn raid. While he was in the courtroom here and was eventually told that he would be given a $250,000 bond, which means he would be able to walk out today, the federal agents have been at his home exercising a search warrant. The agents set up a series of tents in and around the house so that news helicopters and everybody else who might be able to hear from above with a drone or something would be obstructed. So we're not exactly sure what's going on because the street is also closed. Roger Stone's coming in. But there's been a fair amount of anticipation out here. As you know better than anybody, Andrea, Roger Stone is somebody who likes to speak confidently, and I suspect when he walks over here to these microphones, we're going to hear some vintage statements from him. He has been quite vocal already about the Mueller investigation. Some people say that he's even been taunting the investigation. So this indictment now and this being taken into custody certainly didn't come as a surprise, but he did not know what was going to happen this morning. Federal agents knocking on his door with guns and bulletproof vests. Andrea? Your red light is blinking. I don't know what it means. Do it now. Do whatever you need to do now.
Who are you with? They just came out. We'll get you out there. Trump says this is the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country.
status of Jim?
Check.
Okay, what's the status of Jim?
Basketball here.
He must be setting up.
I got a call like 20 minutes ago.
I see him setting up over there.
It's under the new
I think I see Raul.
This is Erica. Can we test the podium mic, please?
What's your new brand? Imagine. I've never heard of content. What does it do?
Yes, I do.
News, entertainment, and sports.
Here we go.
For USA Today.
Okay,
I'm going
so-
right down there when it happens.
Okay, 3 days.
Go there.
You're no longer.
I know.
What were you before?
No, when he's coming up, I'm going to go down so you can get him. I'll narrate and I'll stay down and out of the way.
At some point, I got to cue your audio.
I know. I'll tell you.
Well, that's
I'll-
more work for you.
Yes,
Yeah,
Mom.
I know. I just literally got a call like, how quick can you get on the phone?
Get a microphone. Give me a
I think I
microphone.
drove like 85 miles.
You okay?
Find a spot. So everybody's kind of. I'm like, look.
That's a very generous term when you say mix. We're going to actually get my microphone turned off and the other one's going to turn on. So you might even hear a slight delay. Just so you know, Bob, we have a second crew setting up. Are you up on the... Are you transmitting? Are you? We have another camera here that's trying to get up so you can pick up a second camera transmission. Okay. Yeah. What we're going to get you, hopefully what we're going to get you is a head-on shot.
I figure there's no way in hell I'm getting close enough. I don't have to come up with just a little bit more room for everybody. I'll see what I can do about that. Wait here.
I'm better now. I'm getting better. I'm getting a little better.
Okay, please do that. My daughter was in late class. Knock them up.
Stand with Roger.
I'm sorry.
Stand with Roger.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I respect your opinion.
I know you do.
We're all here for it.
We are. Absolutely.
It'll work itself out one way.
Carla.
Hey, Bob.
Carla.
52H, you might have another signal. Look at 52H and see if you have another shot.
We're going to move back. We're going to move back. We're going to make sure you hit it. We're going to get it. You got it. You're going to get it down.
Where is it? Thank you very much. Hey, Carrie.
What?
Marsh. Sheriff, right
The
there.
man.
Sheriff.
See the Philly. I know. Right.
Carlos. Carlos, do you have one of these little white stupid connectors in these new phones?
I do, but not here.
Do you have one?
He called into InfoWars.
I think it's got a K.
He just called into InfoWars. That's ridiculous.
Bob, you're a great guy. I just want to make sure whether
He needs it.
whether I'm wrong.
I mean, he wants to retire. You guys
Well,
don't
if
like
it is,
yeah, send him on board.
I mean, you're going to be right.
I have married someone. I have too many in my life right now.
Yes, so yeah, I have to switch files.
I am. Yes. Change my profile picture. You just laughed. Did you? Yeah. I did. I use a casual, not event picture too. All right, let's do a selfie. Let's give you the real deal. That's great. Here, let's do a selfie.
That's where there's two of us. I thought at that time where I started heading get things around like 3 o'clock.
I think they passed commercials. I've got filled up. I don't know if I'm ever going to get
I have no idea what they were doing a noon live shot for so what I do have here, yeah, all I have is 52H, which is Craven, then Rao and Mario. Yeah, but Rigao is going to be just a carry.
Rudy, you can come behind us maybe. You can maybe come behind us. I don't know.
Oh, yes.
Well, he's over to the left. I mean, there's going to be a live guy right here. But maybe you come right there. Well, he's going to do a live shot with this guy.
I get next to him.
That's what I'm saying. You might be able to get right there. He'll trade with you. He'll trade spots with you.
We got to just reach out here with a live shot. Yeah, you go over there. Where's he going? We're trying to right.
Next to the lady.
Next to the lady in the group. Damn it! What happened?
Here goes CNN.
Just put him on.
Okay, but I'm right here.
Yeah, put it back up there. I got some. It's the clutch. Yeah, I'm going to check it next. All right. Looks okay. Come on, Roger.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day again, everyone. We're coming back on the air to bring you the first public comments from Trump confidant Roger Stone following his arrest and indictment this morning by special counsel Robert Mueller's office. Stone appearing in federal court in Florida this morning with his attorneys is emerging now. We expect him to make some remarks to the reporters who were gathered outside that courthouse, standing with, we believe, members of his legal team. He has been outspoken in the past, already speaking in the last few minutes on a radio program, professing his innocence and saying that he will not bear false witness against the president, meaning if offered, he would not speak out against the president or contradict his claims of no collusion and innocence. So here is the scene. Let's listen.
Mr. Stone is going to speak. He speaks for himself. You know that Roger Stone has always spoken for himself. He's never been shy about telling his story. He is innocent. We're going to defend this case, and we're going to win this case. But let me start out by saying that the spectacle this morning was completely unnecessary. Everyone knows where Roger Stone is. He's not in hiding. The spectacle this morning with a SWAT team breaking into his house, searching the house, scaring his wife, scaring his dogs, completely unnecessary. A telephone call would have done the job, and Mr. Stone would have appeared. But let Roger speak for himself. There's nothing to hide. He has nothing to hide, and he's spoken before, and he'll speak to you now. Roger?
Congratulations, Roger. Got you, Roger.
Thank you.
Stand with you, Roger.
Thank you. Well, as I have always said, the only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about. After a 2-year inquisition, the charges today relate in no way to Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other illegal act in connection with the 2016 campaign.
I am falsely accused of making false statements during my testimony to the House Intelligence Committee. That is incorrect. Any error I made in my testimony would be both immaterial and without intent. I find it disturbing that the special counsel's office released a press release prior to informing my attorneys that I would be charged today. This morning, at the crack of dawn, 29 FBI agents arrived at my home with 17 vehicles with their lights flashing when they could simply have contacted my attorneys, and I would have been more than willing to surrender voluntarily. They terrorized my wife, my dogs. I was taken to the FBI facility, although I must say the FBI agents were extraordinarily courteous. I will plead not guilty to these charges. I will defeat them in court. I believe this is a politically motivated investigation. I am troubled by the political motivations of the prosecutors. And as I have said previously, there is no circumstance whatsoever under which I will bear false witness against the president, nor will I make up lies to ease the pressure on myself. I look forward to being fully and completely vindicated.
Roger, did you in any way cooperate with the special counsel's office? Did you in any way cooperate with the special counsel's office?
Since I was not contacted prior to the charges today, and my lawyers have not talked to the special prosecutors, I don't want to address that question, but I have made it clear I will not testify against the president. Because I would have to bear false witness against him.
Will you work with the prosecutor?
I will be appearing for an arraignment in D.C. next week, and I'll address those questions at that time.
Roger, the president said that you had guns. He tweeted that. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I intend to tell the truth. I have told the truth through this entire proceeding, and I will prove that in a court of law.
How strong is your allegiance to President Trump?
I am one of his oldest friends. I am a fervent supporter of the president. I think he is doing a great job of making America great again.
Roger, did anyone tell you to contact in the Trump campaign to contact WikiLeaks?
No, I've addressed that before. That is incorrect.
Roger, if you're convicted, do you think the president would pardon you? If you're convicted, do you think the president will pardon you?
Pardon me?
If you were convicted, do you think the president would pardon you?
The only person I have advocated a pardon for is Marcus Garvey.
Some from NBC News, sir.
Yes.
The question is, did you in any way work with the Russians to help President Trump?
Categorically not. No, absolutely not.
And the prosecutor, your special prosecutor,
We got you, Roger.
is gathering
We got your
evidence.
back, Roger.
Will you in any way...
With all due respect, I haven't even had a chance to read the indictment.
You haven't even read the indictment?
Correct. My attorneys have. I have not had that opportunity.
So will you help the prosecutor answer his question?
I will address those questions next week in Washington, D.C.
Roger,
Thank you.
If you didn't do nothing wrong, what do you think you here?
It's your turn in the mayor office.
Roger Stone in an absolute mob scene of reporters, supporters, and protesters there proclaiming his innocence, saying he will not plead guilty to the charges he faced that came down in the form of indictment from the special counsel's office today. He has had his first court appearance at a federal court in Florida today. This is not the formal arraignment that will come, but he's made it clear that if asked, he will not cooperate. He would not testify against the president. He says he will plead not guilty. He will defeat them in court, and them referring to the special counsel, saying it's a politically motivated prosecution. He said he did nothing that would be illegal in way of Russian collusion, that they have no such case. Let's go to Kerry Sanders. Kerry, we couldn't hear all of your exchange with Stone. Give us the highlights of what was said.
My brother's name's Kerry, too.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
Kerry Sanders. All right, we'll get to Kerry in a moment. Let's go to Pete Williams now, our justice correspondent, who's watching all this from our Washington newsroom. What stood out to you there as you were watching, Pete?
that he says that he did not, that no one at the campaign told him to contact the Russians. And that is one of the allegations that's in the indictment against Roger Stone today. The special counsel says that Roger Stone was urged by a member of the Trump campaign to find out what else WikiLeaks may have on the Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. And according to Roger Stone, of course, he brought this on himself by initially claiming he was in touch with Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. Later, he changed that to say, no, I wasn't. And what the indictment says is that he was dealing with WikiLeaks through an intermediary, a talk show host named Randy Credico. So the two charges here, Lester, one is that Roger Stone himself in September of 2017 lied to Congress when he denied having these contacts. And secondly, that he urged Randy Credico himself to lie and invoked the name of a character from the Godfather movie who lied to Congress when in that film. So the allegation here, by the way, what you heard people yelling in the background was, lock him up. So this has gotten a huge amount of attention down there in South Florida, starting with the arrest this morning, Roger Stone complaining about the FBI coming to his house pre-dawn, and instead of just inviting him to turn himself in.
And just to be clear, because this is going to come up, Pete, is it standard procedure? I assume this is obviously a felony. Is it standard procedure to come in with the heavy weapons and the heavy presence?
Oh, it varies. I think one of the reasons they did this is that they haven't had a lot of contact with him and his lawyers, the special counsel. And secondly, there is a charge of obstruction of justice here. And so I suppose the government could say, we were concerned that because he's tried to mislead us in the past, that if we asked him to come in nicely, he might not have done that.
All right, we want to go to, Pete, thanks, go to Kerry Sanders now. You saw him outside the courthouse standing right next to Roger Stone. Kerry, I couldn't hear all of your exchange because of the loud crowd there. Can you give us the highlights of your conversation with him?
Well, I attempted to ask him, first of all, about whether his allegiance in any way wavered for the president. It does not. Many of the questions that were shouted here had to do with the arrest this morning, which he felt was inappropriate. He said he wasn't going anywhere. And I think what was most interesting to me also was when I asked him about the indictment, he said he hadn't even read the indictment. His attorneys had looked at it, but he had not even read the indictment yet. So you heard the jeering, you heard the cheering. It was more jeers than cheers, but a large crowd out here as he attempted to proclaim his innocence and to say that he would not be helping the Mueller investigation against President Trump. Of course, that's what he says here outside the federal court. We'll see what happens in the coming days once he's actually seated in front of the team of attorneys, prosecutors here, who will be asking him some very pointed questions.
All right, Kerry Sanders, thanks very much. And he also echoed what we've heard from the president, almost a one-size-fits-all protest that there's no collusion, that this is a witch hunt. We've certainly heard that from the White House in the past. And Kristen Welker, I understand that's what we're hearing this morning.
That's right. President Trump has responded defiantly on Twitter, Lester. Let me read you the tweet from the president. Greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. No collusion, in all caps. Border coyotes, drug dealers, and human traffickers are treated better. Who alerted CNN to be there? That's a reference to the fact that CNN was there and captured the arrest in the early morning hours today. Now, a more measured statement from Jay Sekulow, who's the president's attorney, who says the indictment today does not allege Russian collusion by Roger Stone or anyone else. Rather, the indictment focuses on alleged false statements Mr. Stone made to Congress. And this from Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. This has nothing to do with the president and certainly nothing to do with the White House. It is a familiar tactic that we have seen from this administration to try to distance the president from Roger Stone. But of course, their relationship goes back decades. They've been friends and associates for more than 3 decades, Lester. And of course, Stone did serve for a period of time on the Trump campaign. But again, the stance from Sarah Sanders today, look, this has nothing to do with President Trump. Now, let me just give you a sense of what's happening here behind the scenes at the White House. I can tell you that administration officials officials have been huddled in meetings throughout the better part of this morning. And we know that equipment is being set up in the Rose Garden. So the question becomes, are we going to hear from President Trump today? We don't know that. No confirmation of that yet. But of course, Lester, this is all unfolding as the president is overseeing the longest shutdown in American history, now entering its 35th day. So we're watching and waiting to see very closely if we hear at all from President Trump later today on any of these topics. But again, this latest indictment looming very large over the Trump administration. The issue of the Russia investigation has been one of the critical issues that has really dogged this president. Now, yet another twist. Lester.
Yeah, and another incredible news day we're following. Kristen Welker, thank you. Let me go to Meet the Press moderator Chuck Todd in our Washington newsroom. Chuck, there is going to be a temptation to connect dots that we can't necessarily connect here. But what's the greater picture right now for this White House, for this president?
Well, look, what this does is I understand why the Trump lawyers and the Trump White House wants to focus on what I think they're referring to as the process side of this indictment, saying that this is really Mueller bringing the hammer down on Stone for lying to Congress, for obstructing justice, for witness tampering. But the other part of the indictment is you start to see that Mueller is laying out at least evidence of collusion between WikiLeaks, obviously who was releasing those emails, the stolen material, and who received the stolen material, and the Trump campaign with Roger Stone as the conduit. So even as the president screams no collusion, you have that being laid out in this indictment, Lester. And recall, and I brought this up before, but recall, Rudy Giuliani about 10 days ago changed the defense on the issue of collusion, just saying he can only say that the president didn't collude with anybody. He couldn't speak for everybody in the campaign. Well, lo and behold, here's an indictment that alleges basically a form of collusion between Stone, the campaign, and WikiLeaks. But what this does not do is connect it all to Russia. Mueller has connected WikiLeaks to Russian intelligence, but there is no yet connection of Russia to Stone, Russia to the Trump campaign on this. But one other thing I want to caution folks on is some people try to take every part of the Russia story and make sure they're all connected. It's very possible these are all distinct, multiple operations in different parts and not purely connected, but essentially almost a series of coordinated attempts to get involved in this election. So you had the WikiLeaks aspect of it, but you also had perhaps the Trump Tower meeting was something separate, and you have the other parts of the business dealings. Some people want to try to put one large circle around everything. This does look like each one of these is discrete, and I think that's what makes this sometimes very difficult to follow for folks. But realize, don't attempt to draw an entire circle around this. What this is about is WikiLeaks, Stone, and the Trump campaign.
It's a fair point. I think there's a tendency to want to see a narrative that moves in a linear fashion.
This isn't Law and Order, right? Everybody's looking for the dum-dum. Okay, here's how it all's connected. It may not be that clean.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I want to pick up one of the points you talked about there by going to NBC News legal analyst Chuck Rosenberg. Chuck Todd just a moment ago raised the issue that maybe this shows no connection with Russia, but it clearly seems to make the link to collusion or conversations with WikiLeaks. To the extent they're not a state actor, would that in itself be illegal?
Oh, sure, it could be, Lester. And to Chuck's point, and I think he's spot on, what we call this is a multi-object conspiracy. In other words, a conspiracy to do a bunch of different things. Maybe a conspiracy to hack into DNC computers between certain actors. Maybe a conspiracy to launder money. Maybe a conspiracy to rob banks. Maybe a conspiracy to lie to Congress. Chuck's point, and it really is worth reiterating, is that we do try to tie all of this together, but they may be disparate pieces. And so I think we ought to look at this for what it is. The indictment today of Roger Stone draws a connection between the Trump campaign, and by the way, the indictment is very clear about that, and between Roger Stone and between WikiLeaks. That's a crime. And people ought to understand the limitations of the indictment, too. It doesn't sweep more broadly than it has to. It sweeps broadly enough to charge Stone, and I can guarantee you to convict him.
You think it's a strong case based on what you've seen in the indictment?
I do, Lester. And when we write indictments, I was a federal prosecutor for a long time, we don't haphazardly put words down on paper. Every paragraph, every sentence, every word is something that we can prove in federal court pursuant to the federal rules of evidence. I guarantee to you that is what prosecutors did here. Every word here means something. Every word here can be proved in a court of law.
Chuck Rosenberg, good to talk to you. Thanks very much. We want to go back to Kristen Welker at the White House. Kristen, as we noted, there are a lot of moving parts right now in Washington. There is this the Stone indictment, but we're still watching the government shutdown. There was some movement yesterday, perhaps signs of negotiations and compromise. Set the rest of the day for us. What are we looking at here?
Just to set the scene, Lester, and what we're watching very closely right now, equipment being set up in the Rose Garden here at the White House. We don't know what that is for. Of course, we're watching and wondering if we might hear from President Trump today about the shutdown. But I think you hit on a very key point. Yesterday, we really sensed that the tone was shifting here at the White House and on Capitol Hill. What happened? We saw two competing bills defeated, essentially two bills in the Senate. One was a Republican-backed bill that did include funding for the president's border wall. Another one was a Democratic-backed bill that didn't include any funding for the wall, but both of them failed. And that sort of gave the green light for both sides to start talking. And President Trump made comments yesterday, and he was asked directly if he could support a short-term deal to reopen the government. And the president indicated, really for the first time in quite some time, that he could, in fact, back that. And when asked if he would back something that didn't include funding for the border wall, the president didn't say no. He said, look, there are a lot of other options he's potentially considering. We know that lawmakers have been huddling late into the night trying to hammer out a deal. So we're watching to see very closely if there's any movement there. Lester.
All right. Kristen Welker, thanks very much. I know you won't stray far from where you are. I'm not going to stray far from where I am. As we noted, there's a lot going on here. We'll come back on the air as events warrant on either of these stories. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News Los Angeles. We'll see you later on.